Hi, everyone. Welcome to today's Research America Alliance discussion. Thank you so much for joining us on Zoom and for your partnership in the Research America Alliance. If your organization is not a member, we invite you to stay as our guest, but please get in touch with my colleague Joel, who will be happy to connect with you and talk about the wonderful benefits that come with being a member of our alliance. And his email's in the chat. Today, we are very pleased to be joined by Andi Fristedt, who's the FDA Deputy Commissioner for Policy, Legislation, and International Affairs. Andi's position is a relatively new one, and she'll talk about it. But before being appointed, she served for nearly a decade on the Senate Health Committee, first for Senator Tom Harkin and later Senator Patty Murray. So we've asked Andi to join us today for a conversation about some key FDA policy issues affecting patients, researchers, and industry. As always, please type your questions in the Q&A box or the chat, and we'll pose as many as we can when we get to that portion of our conversation. So thank you, Andi, for joining us. I'm going to turn it over to you right now.
All right. Well, thanks, Jenny. Really happy to be here and appreciate the invitation to join this group for this conversation. You know, Research America and its members and FDA share so many priorities, and I'm really glad to be able to be here with all of you to talk about just a few of those. I know we'll just scratch the surface today. As Jenny mentioned, I am in a relatively new position in this iteration. I'm running a relatively new office. We had a reorganization not too long before the pandemic struck. And so we'll spend a little bit of time talking about my office and the work that we do and highlight some sort of key policy priorities. And we'll make sure that we have some time for questions at the end. So as Jenny said, I run the Office of Policy, Legislation, and International Affairs, or OPLEA, as we call it here at FDA. And we're a constellation of 6 distinct offices with a total of about 240 employees, just to give you a sense of scope. And within FDA, OPLEA has a significant and wide-reaching role. We offer strategic policy direction to advance FDA's public health mission, and are the focal point for engagement with Congress, but also with the administration, with our global partners, partners at the state, local, territorial, and tribal level. And, you know, so in general, kind of folks in the policymaking community. You know, Congress, for sure, takes a significant interest in the work that FDA does. You know, we regulate products that account for almost 25 cents of every consumer dollar spent, and that gives us a lot to talk about with them. Our Office of Legislation works really closely with our authorizing committees, relevant caucuses, and congressional leadership on policy and authorizing matters. And then we also have an Office of Congressional Appropriations, which focuses, as one might expect, on our appropriations committees and funding and budget-related issues. You know, we work really hard to keep the Hill informed on the work that we're doing and work really closely on shared priorities. And, you know, we'll talk a little bit about the user fee reauthorizations and the policy riders that pass at the end of the year a little later. But, you know, I would just say, especially over the course of the last year, we've had a lot of opportunities to work really, really closely with our colleagues on the Hill. In addition to our sort of congressional facing offices, we have an intergovernmental affairs staff that coordinates directly with states, tribes, localities, and territories, everyone from governors to our attorneys general and regulators in the states and tribes and localities. So really important partnerships there. Our Office of Policy includes lawyers, scientists, healthcare practitioners, and policy analysts who drive policy priorities for the agency. And that includes work to develop and coordinate the review and analysis of broad agency policy, ensure consistency and content of agency policy. You know, one of the real values that my office brings is, you know, we can sort of see across the whole agency. And so know if something's happening in the biologic space, how does that relate to maybe a decision with some similar equities in the devices space? So we try to make sure that we have that sort of broad view in advancing the agency's policy priorities. That office works really closely with our Office of Economics and Analysis. As folks on this call, I think well know, when we talk about good public health policy, it's really largely about assessing risks and benefits and trade-offs. And so our economics staff is really key to doing that, and especially in the context of developing regulatory impact analyses for our rulemakings. That office also serves as the agency's primary point of contact with the Government Accountability Office, as well as the Office of the Inspector General. And then finally, just to spend a minute on our international work. Our Office of Global Policy and Strategy is also part of OPLIA. FDA has offices all over the world. We work with local regulators in dozens of countries on a host of issues, whether it's international harmonization, trade issues, and other engagement with our regulatory counterparts around the globe. So really an important part of the work that we do when we think about what cross-cutting policy work looks like for the agency. Across these areas, I work with just a really incredibly dedicated group of people, diverse backgrounds, all committed to the same mission, and who are really showing up every day to advance the public health. So, I want to highlight just a few of the policy priorities that we've advanced in recent months. First, some in the sort of regulatory administrative space, and then we'll talk a little bit about some of our policy work with the Hill. One thing that we've been especially excited about recently, just last month, FDA announced that it's proposing a change from time-based deferrals to assessing blood donor eligibility using gender-inclusive, individual risk-based questions to reduce the risk of transfusion-transmitted HIV. This is a policy that folks have been really thinking about for a long time. It's a proposal that's in line with policies from countries like the United Kingdom or Canada. And when finalized, we are really excited that we believe this draft guidance will potentially increase the number of individuals eligible to donate blood without compromising the safety or the availability of the blood supply. In the device space, this past October, in response to bipartisan legislation, FDA established a new regulatory category for over-the-counter hearing aids. This followed an executive order from President Biden on promoting competition in the American economy. And as a result of this rule, many consumers have gained access to safe, effective, affordable hearing aids, whether it's from online or from their neighborhood store down the street, and for the first time available without having a medical exam or a prescription or fitting adjustment by an audiologist for folks in that category. So we're really hopeful that this new category of hearing aids will foster innovation and competition in the hearing aid marketplace and have really important implications when we think about lower costs for consumers. Also, this past April, the agency published draft guidance to provide recommendations to sponsors developing medical products on the approach for developing race and ethnicity diversity plans. This looks at enrolling representative numbers of participants from underrepresented racial and ethnic populations. We know that adequate representation of these populations in clinical trials and studies helps ensure that the data generated, it really makes sure that using the medical product, if approved, will be of benefit to everybody who might use it. It also gives us an opportunity to really look for, specific safety or efficacy outcomes that may occur more frequently within these populations. I'll talk a little bit more later about some of our work with the Hill on diversity in clinical trials, but I would just say that this effort is just a piece of the critical work that our staff has been doing to promote appropriate diversity in this space as part of our work, cross-cutting work here. Critically, as I mentioned last year, we also brought 2022 also brought the reauthorization of the human medical product user fees, as I think many folks on this conversation are well aware. I'm going to spend a few minutes talking about some of the policy riders that the agency and the Hill worked really closely on, but I know this group is also really interested in the regulatory enhancements, in particular in PDUFA 7. So I just want to sort of highlight a few of those. I mean, first, among other key provisions, PDUFA 7 enhances CBER's capacity, our biologic center's capacity, to guide development and regulate innovative products such as cell and gene therapies. That's a place that we are really excited to see that sort of growth and additional innovation and capacity for the agency here. PDUFA 7 also included new approaches to improve efficiency and expand communication in the Human Drugs Review Program. FDA will continue under PDUFA 7 to use innovative methods and tools to enhance regulatory decision-making, especially focused on patient-focused drug development methods and tools-related guidance and practice. And we're really thrilled about additions such as post-marketing provisions to ensure safe use of medicines through continued enhancements to our drug safety system, such as optimizing the Sentinel initiative and modernizing REMS assessments. There was a commitment to utilizing modern technology and supporting bioinformatics to enhance and streamline drug development and review. And in addition, it establishes a data and technology modernization strategy that reflects previous FDA work under our Technology and Data Modernization Action Plan. And lastly, maybe just the last thing I'll mention on PDUFA 7 is that, in terms of our commitment to enhancement of FDA's financial management and transparency of operations under the program, that's another real area of emphasis. The agency made similarly significant strides when it comes to MDUFA on medical devices, BsUFA on biosimilars, and GDUFA on generic drugs. All of those were also reauthorized last year. And so we're really excited to sort of be right at the sort of early steps of moving forward into all of these new programs. The funding under these user fee agreements is really essential to FDA. But I want to spend a minute talking also about our budget authority, which of course is appropriated by Congress each year. I think you've probably heard other agency leaders come in and say that we can always do more with more. And, this was a really good year for us, both on the user fee and appropriations front, to think about how we can strengthen our funding and what that means for impacting our mission. FDA's funding sources for medical products come from both user fees and appropriations, and how the agency spends those resources is, of course, directed by Congress. It's interesting to look at how that varies across our different medical product areas. For our human drugs products, the program is supported by just 33% budget authority and 67% user fees. The biologics program has 55% budget authority and 45% user fees. And then of our human medical product programs, the devices program has the most largest percentage of budget authority. It's 59% budget authority, and just 41% of that program is funded by user fees. At the very end of 2022, Congress passed the year-end Omnibus spending bill. So this came several months after the reauthorization of the user fees. And that included both the appropriations, but also the Food and Drug Omnibus Reform Act, which we have all begun calling FDORA, which advanced critical new authorities for the agency. Looking at both user fee and budget authority, FDA received $470 million in additional funding, and we're just really grateful to Congress for that support. Under FDORA, FDA gained many new authorities that will help us fulfill our public health mandate. It was a really comprehensive effort, and I think there's a lot in there that's really going to advance the ball for the agency when it comes to public health policy. I'll mention just really a small fraction of those. We're really worked very closely with the Hill on enhanced device cybersecurity authorities. We are working now with additional regulatory oversight over cosmetics to help ensure the safety of products that many consumers use daily. The FDORA included an extension of 21st Century Cures hiring authority to additional areas of the agency. That authority was previously just in our medical product centers, and now for foods and cosmetics, this authority is going to be really critical in helping us to address staffing challenges that we've been navigating. And many others. One provision of particular interest and importance is the enhancement of FDA's authority for accelerated approval for new drugs. Accelerated approval is a really vital pathway to get promising treatments to patients with unmet medical needs. And it's critical that FDA has the necessary tools to balance helping bring treatments to market while ensuring safety and efficacy of the products that we oversee. FDA needs to be able to ensure that sponsors are capable of developing confirmatory evidence and to act on efficient withdrawal when needed. Previously, law did not provide FDA with sufficient authority to target accelerated approval confirmatory studies that failed to make sufficient progress. And in some cases, because of the limits in authority, it took years to lawfully withdraw approval of a product under this pathway. But now, under FDORA, new accelerated approval provisions will help ensure that post-approval studies for drugs that are approved under the accelerated approval pathway are well positioned at the time of approval to be completed expeditiously, completed successfully. And this is going to increase trust in the pathway's ability to bring therapies with proven benefit to market. Significantly, just one more point on this, enhancing the timeliness and the quality of those confirmatory studies will help FDA's regulatory decision-making for drugs that are approved through that pathway, minimizing the time that a product is marketed based on accelerated approval before that clinical benefit is confirmed, which is, a piece that's been of real focus on this. Before wrapping up, I do want to loop back for just a minute on diversity in clinical trials. I mentioned some of the work that the agency has done on this space recently in advance of the enactment of FDORA. But FDORA also included a number of provisions related to the goal of improving clinical trial diversity. First, the legislation requires sponsors of phase 3 and other pivotal studies of new drugs and sponsors of device studies to develop and submit a diversity action plan to the agency. It also requires FDA to issue new guidance or update existing guidance on diversity action plans within a year of enactment. Requires FDA and stakeholders to convene public workshops on increasing the enrollment of historically underrepresented populations in clinical studies, and encouraging clinical study participation that reflects the prevalence of the disease or condition among demographic subgroups. And finally, it requires FDA to publish on our website whether the clinical studies met the enrollment goals, and if not, the reasons provided for why enrollment goals were not met. So again, this is, we touched on 5 of many policies, all of which the agency is now actively engaged in implementing. I would just say a word. We talked at the beginning about the role of the Office of Legislation, the Office of Policy, and I would just say, those offices, as well as the centers and offices across the agency, really, this has been a all hands on deck effort. We held, countless briefings with Congress, responded to dozens of requests for technical assistance. And truly, this effort has been so important in advancing this package of policies. And of course, we're really grateful for the partnership of our colleagues on the Hill. We know we had folks on both sides of the aisle, both chambers, working around the clock to advance not only a strong appropriation for the agency, not only getting the user fee reauthorizations across the finish line, but also partnering with us on so many of these really important policy riders. Of course, there are areas where we will continue to work with Congress on priorities that weren't enacted. Regulatory oversight of diagnostic testing is a space where there was a lot of engagement over the course of the last year that was not included in the end of the year package. Similarly, dietary supplement product listing, application of orphan drug exclusivity, and some others where we'll certainly continue to work closely with our colleagues on the Hill. I think this is probably a good place for me to stop, open the conversation up to questions. I do really want to, again, thank you for inviting me to join today. So much of FDA's success is due to really tremendous partnership, support, and expertise gained from organizations like this one, and just really appreciate everything that you all do.